The bus coughed black smoke as it pulled away, leaving Eliza Crow standing alone on a dirt road that stretched into nothing. She held everything she owned in a canvas bag that smelled like mildew and defeat. 42 years old, 230 pounds, $3.60 in her pocket. This was what rock bottom looked like when you hit it hard enough to crack bone. The Blackwood Ranch sprawled across the horizon like a wound, raw earth, skeletal corrals, buildings that looked like they'd been hammered together by men who had better things to do. This was the kind of place that appeared on maps as empty space. The kind of place where women like Eliza didn't belong. She'd learned that much from the phone call. "You sure you can handle physical labor?" The voice had been skeptical, bordering on hostile. "I can work," she'd said. "Not yes. Not promises. Just the truth stripped bare. Room and board, $40 a week. Work starts at 5. You're late. You're fired. You complain, you're fired. You can't keep up. I'll keep up." The laugh on the other end had been sharp. "We'll see." Now walking toward the main house with dust coating her shoes, Eliza understood what that laugh meant. This wasn't a job offer. It was a dare. The bunkhouse foreman met her outside the dining hall. His name was Vic Drummond, and he had the face of a man who enjoyed watching things break. 50-something, with sun-damaged skin and eyes like chips of flint. He looked her up and down the way you'd assess livestock before deciding it wasn't worth the feed. "You're the one from the phone." Not a question. "Eliza Crow." Crow? He rolled it around his mouth like he was tasting something sour. "Well, Crow, I'll be honest. I told the owner this was a mistake. We need workers, not charity cases." The words should have stung. Maybe a month ago they would have. But Eliza had left her shame somewhere in the last town, in the last apartment where the landlord changed the locks while she was out looking for work. She'd left it in the food bank line, in the women's shelter, in every place that taught her the world didn't owe her gentleness. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I'm asking for work." Vic's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You'll get it." He led her past the dining hall where men were finishing breakfast. The conversation died as she walked by. 20 pairs of eyes tracked her movement, some curious, most dismissive, a few openly hostile. "Fresh meat," someone muttered, loud enough to carry. $10 says she quits before lunch." "Lunch? I'll give her 2 hours." Vic didn't tell them to shut up. He smiled wider. They stopped outside the women's bunkhouse, a narrow building that looked like an afterthought. Inside 4 beds, 3 of them empty. "Other women quit," Vic said. "Couldn't handle it. You'll bunk here. Bathrooms shared. Water's cold most mornings. You break something, you pay for it. Meals are at 6, noon, and 7. You miss them. You go hungry. Work assignments get posted at dawn. Any questions?" Eliza dropped her bag on the nearest bed. "Where do I start?" Vic's expression flickered, surprise maybe, or disappointment that she hadn't given him an excuse to send her packing immediately. "Dane's crew," he said. "They're working the north fence line. I'll take you out there now." The name meant nothing to her then. She grabbed her hat and followed. The truck rattled over washboard roads, kicking up dust that turned the morning sun into a haze. Vic drove in silence for the first mile, then glanced over. "You ever worked a ranch before?" "No? Ever worked outside?" "Not like this." "Christ." He shook his head. "You know what happens to people who can't cut it out here? They leave. If they're lucky. If they're not, they get hurt. Broken bones, heat stroke. Had a guy lose 3 fingers to a fence tensioner last year. Another one got kicked by a horse, cracked his skull open. This ain't a game, Crow. This is serious work for serious people." Eliza watched the landscape roll past. "Then I'll be serious." Vic laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't get it. Dane Rourke doesn't babysit. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't give second chances. You either keep up or you wash out. And honestly," he shot her a look, "my money's on washout." "That's fine," Eliza said quietly. "Keep your money." The fence line stretched across a section of range so desolate it looked like the earth had given up trying. 6 men worked in brutal synchronization, digging post holes, hauling wire, driving stakes into ground that fought back. They moved like a machine, each piece knowing its function. And at the center of it all was Dane Rourke. Eliza saw him before Vic said his name. Tall, lean in the way that came from work and not gyms. maybe 35. Dark hair under a sweat-stained hat. He was setting a post with a sledgehammer, and each swing landed with the precision of a metronome. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Just relentless, measured force. Vic killed the engine. "Wait here." He walked over and Eliza watched them talk. Dane didn't stop working. Didn't look toward the truck, but she saw the moment Vic gestured in her direction, saw Dane's shoulders tense slightly, saw him shake his head once. Vic said something else. Dane's response was short. The conversation ended with Vic walking back, looking satisfied in a way that made Eliza's stomach tighten. "Good news," he said. "You're on Dane's crew." "And the bad news?" Vic grinned. "That is the bad news. Get out. You're burning daylight." Eliza climbed down from the truck. The men had stopped working, watching. Dane still hadn't looked at her. Vic leaned out the window. "Dane? She's all yours." Then he drove away, leaving her standing in the dust like an unwanted package. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Eliza could feel the weight of their stares, the barely contained amusement. Finally, Dane set down the sledgehammer and turned. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale blue and cold. They assessed her with the same detached efficiency he'd used on the fence post. No malice, no curiosity, just calculation. "You know how to dig?" he asked. "I can learn." Wrong answer. He picked up a shovel and tossed it at her feet. "You either know or you don't. We don't have time for lessons." One of the other men snorted. "Come on, Dane, she can't—" "She's here." Dane's voice cut like a blade. "She works. Or she leaves. That's the deal." He looked at Eliza. "Post holes 2 feet deep, 1 foot wide. I need 6 before lunch. Any questions?" Eliza picked up the shovel. The handle was rough, weathered by countless hands. "Where do you want them?" Something flickered in Dane's expression, so brief she almost missed it. "Follow the string line, every 8 feet. He paused. "Keep up." Then he turned back to his work, and the crew followed suit. The moment was over. She was already forgotten. Eliza found the string line and started digging. The ground was harder than concrete. Each stab of the shovel sent shocks up her arms. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into something solid and suffocating. Sweat soaked through her shirt within minutes. Her hands, soft from months of unemployment, started to blister. She kept digging. The men worked around her like she didn't exist. They talked, joked, moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged. Nobody offered advice. Nobody slowed down to show her the right technique. This was a test, and they all knew it. 1 hour became 2. Eliza finished the first hole. It wasn't perfect. The sides weren't quite straight, the bottom not quite level, but it was 2 feet deep and 1 foot wide. She started on the second. Her hands were screaming now, blood mixed with dirt under her broken blisters. Her back felt like someone was driving railroad spikes into her spine. But she'd learned something in the years of struggling, of barely surviving. Pain was just information. It told you where your limits were. It didn't tell you to quit. By the time the sun reached its peak, she'd finished 4 holes. Dane walked over, inspected them without comment, and nodded once. "Lunch," he said. The men dropped their tools and headed for the shade of a massive cottonwood tree. Eliza followed, her legs shaking with exhaustion. They sat in a loose circle, pulling sandwiches and canteens from their packs. Eliza had forgotten to bring food. She sat apart, drinking water from her own canteen and trying not to show how badly her hands hurt. "You got a name?" one of the men asked. He was younger than the others, maybe 25, with a sunburned nose and a voice that hadn't quite lost its boyish edge. "Eliza." "I'm Tommy. That's Curtis, Manuel, Jake, and Ray." He pointed to each man in turn. "And you already met Dane." Dane was eating in silence, his back against the tree, hat pulled low over his eyes. "How long you been working ranches?" Tommy asked. "This is my first day." The men exchanged glances. Someone whistled low. "Vic put you with us on your first day?" Curtis, older and harder around the edges, shook his head. "That's cold even for him." "Why?" "Because Dane runs the toughest crew on the ranch," Ray said. He was built like a fire hydrant, short, solid, immovable. "Most new people start with light work. Feeding, cleaning, simple repairs. You get thrown in with us?" He shrugged. That's Vic's way of making sure you quit fast. I'm not quitting. The words came out harder than she intended. Ray raised his eyebrows. Easy. I'm just saying, this ain't beginner work. Then I'll learn fast. You're going to have to, Manuel said. He was lean and weathered, with careful eyes. Dane don't slow down for anybody. As if hearing his name, Dane stood. Lunch was over. 2 more holes, he said to Eliza. Then you're on wire detail with Tommy. The afternoon was worse than the morning. The heat peaked, turning the air into a hammer. Eliza's blisters tore open. Every swing of the shovel was agony. But she dug, because stopping meant admitting Vic was right. Stopping meant proving she was exactly what they all thought she was: weak, worthless, a waste of space. She finished the 5th hole and started the 6th. Halfway through, the shovel slipped from her bloody hands and clattered against rock. Problem? Dane's voice came from directly behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. No. She picked up the shovel. Your hands are bleeding. I know. You should wrap them. I will, after I finish. Silence. Then Dane stepped forward, took the shovel from her grip, and finished the hole himself in 6 powerful strikes. Now wrap them, he said, and walked away. Eliza stood there, too surprised to move. Around her, the other men had stopped working, watching the exchange with expressions she couldn't read. Tommy appeared at her elbow with a roll of cloth tape from his pack. Here. Thanks. Don't mention it. He lowered his voice. That was weird. What was? Dane helping you. He don't usually... Tommy trailed off, shaking his head. Just wrap your hands. Wire duty's going to be rough if you can't grip. Wire duty was hell. The barbed wire came in massive rolls that weighed more than she did. Her job was to help Tommy unroll it, stretch it tight, and hold it in place while he stapled it to the posts. The barbs tore through her shirt. The wire fought them at every turn, coiling back with vicious tension. By the time the sun started its descent, Eliza's arms were covered in scratches. Her wrapped hands were soaked through with blood. Every muscle in her body was screaming. But the fence was up. Dane walked the line, testing each section with his weight. When he finished, he nodded to the crew. Good work. Load up. They packed the tools in silence. Eliza moved like she was underwater, every motion slow and painful. She was the last one to the truck bed, hauling herself up with arms that barely functioned. The ride back was endless. Every bump sent fresh waves of pain through her body. The men talked around her, but she couldn't focus on the words. All she could think about was the bunk waiting for her. Sleep. Darkness. Escape. But when they pulled into the ranch, Vic was waiting. Crow. A word. Eliza climbed down from the truck bed, her legs nearly buckling. Vic looked her over with undisguised satisfaction. Rough day? I'm fine. Sure you are. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I've got your assignment for tomorrow. You'll be... She's with my crew. Everyone turned. Dane stood by the truck, his expression unreadable. Vic's smile faltered. What? Tomorrow. She's with my crew. Dane, come on. Look at her. She can barely stand. I was going to move her to... My crew, Dane repeated. Not loud, not aggressive, just absolutely certain. Vic's jaw worked. For a moment, Eliza thought he might argue, but something in Dane's stillness made him reconsider. Fine, Vic said tightly. Your funeral. But when she breaks, don't come crying to me. He walked away, and Dane followed suit without another glance. Eliza stood in the gathering dusk, too exhausted to process what had just happened. Tommy clapped her gently on the shoulder. Get some food, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be just as bad. Thanks for the encouragement. He grinned. Hey, you made it through day 1. That's more than most people manage with Dane. Maybe you'll surprise us. That night, Eliza sat on her bunk and peeled the tape off her hands. The blisters underneath were raw and angry. She had bruises forming on her arms, her shoulders, her back. Her muscles felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. She thought about Vic's face when Dane had claimed her for his crew again, the surprise in it, the anger. She thought about Dane himself, cold, distant, efficient. A man who didn't waste time on words or comfort, who expected everyone around him to match his relentless pace. Why had he helped her? Why had he insisted she stay with his crew? Eliza didn't have answers, But lying in the dark, listening to the wind scrape against the bunkhouse walls, she made herself a promise. Whatever Dane's reasons were, she wouldn't waste his choice. She wouldn't quit. She wouldn't break. Tomorrow, she'd show up again. And the day after that. And the day after that. For as long as it took to prove that she wasn't what everyone thought she was more. The alarm didn't ring because Eliza never set one. She woke at 4:30 in darkness so complete it felt solid, her body screaming before her mind fully surfaced. Every muscle had seized overnight. Her hands were swollen, the blisters weeping fluid that stuck to the sheets. She sat up anyway. The cold floor shocked through her socks as she stumbled to the bathroom. In the mirror, she looked like someone had worked her over with a tire iron. Dark circles under her eyes, a sunburn across her nose and cheeks that would peel in a day or two, scratches up both forearms from the barbed wire. She splashed water on her face and got dressed. The dining hall was already half full when she arrived at 5:40. Men hunched over plates of eggs and potatoes, shoveling food with the mechanical efficiency of people fueling up for hard labor. Conversation was minimal. Most of them looked half asleep. Eliza filled her plate and found a corner table. The eggs were overcooked, the potatoes underseasoned, but she ate everything. Hunger had taught her not to be picky. "You look like death." She glanced up. Tommy slid into the seat across from her, his own plate piled high. "Thanks. I'm serious. You sure you don't want to ask Vic for an easier assignment? There's no shame in, I'm fine." Tommy studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Your funeral. Just don't pass out on us today. Dane hates drama." Noted. Curtis and Ray joined them, followed by Manuel. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from working together long enough that small talk felt like effort. Eliza appreciated it. She wasn't ready for questions. Dane arrived last, grabbed coffee and nothing else, and headed straight back out. The crew followed like ducklings. The truck bed was freezing in the pre-dawn air. Eliza wedged herself between coiled rope and a toolbox, trying not to jar her hands. The sky was just starting to pale at the edges when they pulled out. "Where are we working today?" she asked Tommy. "Irrigation line in the east pasture. Pipe burst last week, flooded half an acre. We're digging it up and replacing the damaged section." "How long does that take?" "If we're lucky, all day. If we're not," he grimaced, 2 days, maybe 3. The pasture was a swamp. Water had pooled in low spots, turning the ground into slick mud that sucked at their boots. The burst pipe was in the worst possible location, dead center of the flood zone. Dane surveyed the damage with his hands on his hips, then started barking orders. "Curtis, Manuel, start at the valve station. Work your way here. Tommy, Ray, you're on the far end. Eliza, you're with me. We dig out the burst section." The men scattered. Eliza grabbed a shovel and followed Dane into the mud. Digging in wet clay was nothing like digging fence post holes. The mud clung to the shovel, tripled its weight, fought every attempt to move it. Within minutes, Eliza was soaked to the knees. Within an hour, she was covered head to toe in filth. Dane worked beside her in silence, his movements economical and precise. He didn't speak unless necessary, didn't acknowledge her presence unless she was in his way. But he also didn't slow down, and he expected her to match his pace. She tried. Her body protested every motion. The blisters on her hands split open again, bleeding into the mud. Her back spasmed. Her shoulders burned. She kept digging. By mid-morning, they had exposed the pipe. The break was ugly, a jagged tear that ran nearly 3 feet. Water still seeped from it, turning their excavation into a pit of brown sludge. "We need to cut out the damaged section," Dane said, more to himself than her. He climbed out and returned with a pipe cutter and a length of replacement pipe. "Hold this steady." Eliza braced the pipe while he worked. The cutter bit into the metal with a screech that set her teeth on edge. Dane's forearms corded with effort as he worked the tool. Sweat dripped from his chin despite the cold. "You grew up doing this?" she asked, then immediately regretted it. She had no idea if he wanted conversation, but Dane didn't snap at her. "More or less." "Ranch work?" "Different ranch, different state, same dirt." The pipe gave way with a sharp crack. "Hand me the coupling." She passed him the piece he needed, watched as he fitted it with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. "Why'd you leave?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Dane's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "Wasn't my choice." He didn't elaborate, and Eliza knew better than to push. She held the pipe steady while he tightened the fittings, then helped him lower the replacement section into place. "Get the shovel," he said. "We fill it back in." The work was somehow worse in reverse. Every shovelful of mud felt twice as heavy going back into the hole. Eliza's arms shook, her vision blurred at the edges. But Dane's rhythm never faltered, and she refused to be the one who broke first. They were nearly finished when her foot slipped. She went down hard, landing on her side in the mud. The shovel flew from her grip and clattered against the pipe. Dane turned, expressionless. "I'm fine." Eliza pushed herself up, her face burning. "I'm fine. Take 5. "I don't need take 5. Not a suggestion. She climbed out of the pit and sat on a dry patch of grass, hating herself. Around her, the crew was making steady progress. Tommy and Ray were already connecting their section. Curtis and Manuel were hauling out the last of the damaged pipe. And here she was, sitting on her rear while everyone else worked. Dane climbed out beside her, pulled a canteen from his belt, and handed it over. "Drink." Eliza drank. The water was warm and tasted like metal, but it was the best thing she'd had all day. "You don't have to prove anything," Dane said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. It was the most personal thing he'd said to her. "Yeah, I do." "Why?" "Because if I don't, I'm gone, and I've got nowhere else to go." Dane's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. "Fair enough." He stood, offering his hand. Eliza took it, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. "Let's finish this." They worked side by side until the hole was filled and packed. By the time they were done, the sun was directly overhead, and Eliza felt like she'd been run through a cement mixer. Dane inspected their work, nodded once, and moved on to check the rest of the line. Tommy appeared at Eliza's elbow. "You okay?" "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because you look like you're about to keel over." But his tone was friendly, not mocking. "Seriously, though, I've seen grown men quit after a morning with Dane. You're still standing. That counts for something." "Does it? Around here?" "Yeah." He glanced toward where Dane was conferring with Curtis. "Dane doesn't waste time on people he doesn't think can cut it. If he wanted you gone, you'd be gone. But you're here." "He probably just doesn't want to give Vic the satisfaction." Tommy grinned. "Maybe. Or maybe you're tougher than you look." Lunch was cold sandwiches eaten in the shade of the truck. Eliza sat apart again, too tired to make conversation. Her hands hurt so badly she could barely unwrap her sandwich. She managed 3 bites before giving up. "You need to eat." She looked up. Dane stood over her, holding out a tin of something. "What is it?" "Salve. For your hands." Eliza took it, surprised. "Thanks." He didn't respond, just walked back to where the others were sitting. Manuel caught her eye and raised his eyebrows. Curtis shook his head slowly. Even Ray looked bemused. Eliza opened the tin. The salve inside smelled like pine and medicine. She spread it carefully over her blisters, hissing at the sting, then wrapped her hands again with fresh tape from her pocket. The afternoon was more of the same. They moved down the irrigation line, checking every joint, replacing washers, tightening fittings. The work required attention to detail that Eliza's exhausted brain struggled to provide, but she forced herself to focus. Dane didn't repeat instructions. If you missed something the first time, you figured it out or you failed. She didn't want to fail. By the time they packed up for the day, the sun was sinking toward the horizon and Eliza was moving on pure stubbornness. She helped load the tools, then collapsed against the side of the truck bed for the ride back. "You made it," Tommy said, grinning. "Barely." "That's all that matters." Back at the ranch, Eliza headed straight for the bunkhouse. She needed a shower, needed sleep, needed to stop moving before her body gave out entirely. But Vic intercepted her outside the dining hall. "Crow, how was your day?" His tone was pleasant, which immediately put her on guard. "Fine." "Really? Because you look pretty rough. Sure you don't want to switch to something easier? I've got a spot opening up in the—" "I'm fine where I am." Vic's smile thinned. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't offer." He walked away, leaving Eliza with the distinct impression she'd just failed some kind of test, or maybe passed one. With Vic, it was hard to tell. That night, she sat in the empty dining hall long after everyone else had left, staring at a plate of food she was too tired to eat. Her whole body ached, her hands throbbed. She had mud in places she didn't know mud could reach. But she'd survived day 2. The door opened. Dane walked in, grabbed coffee from the urn, and sat 3 tables away. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Eliza watched him for a moment, gathering courage. "Why'd you give me the salve?" Dane didn't look up from his coffee. "Your hands were bleeding." So? So infected hands slow down the whole crew. That's it? Pure efficiency? He finally met her eyes. "You want me to say something else?" "I want to know why you're helping me when everyone else wants me gone." Dane was quiet for a long moment, then he set down his coffee. "You show up, you work, you don't complain. That's more than most people manage." He stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder." He left before she could respond. Eliza sat alone in the empty hall, turning his words over in her mind. It wasn't much, but it was something. She ate her dinner cold and went to bed. Day 3 started with equipment maintenance. Dane's crew spent the morning in the shop, sharpening tools, oiling hinges, replacing worn parts. It was still work, but it was easier than digging in the mud. Eliza's hands appreciated the reprieve. "You know anything about engines?" Curtis asked, nodding toward a small generator that sat in pieces on the workbench. "No." "Want to learn?" She did. Curtis was a patient teacher, walking her through each component, explaining what it did and why it mattered. Eliza absorbed it all, grateful for knowledge that might make her more useful. By lunch, they had the generator running again. Curtis gave her a rare smile. "Not bad. You've got decent hands for detail work." "Even though they're falling apart?" He snorted. "Especially because they're falling apart. Shows you're not afraid to use them." The afternoon brought a new challenge, moving cattle from the south pasture to fresh grazing land. Eliza had never worked with livestock before. The sheer size of the animals terrified her, but she kept that to herself. "Stay on the outside," Dane instructed. "Keep them moving forward. Don't get between them and the fence. If one breaks away, let it go. Don't try to be a hero." The cattle moved like a slow river, massive and unpredictable. Eliza rode in the back of the truck with Tommy, watching as Dane and the others worked the herd with practiced ease. "You ride?" Tommy asked. "No." "Might want to learn. Makes this job easier." "Add it to the list." Halfway through the move, a young steer bolted. It broke from the herd and ran straight toward the fence line where Eliza stood. She froze. The steer was huge, easily 1,000 pounds, and it was coming fast. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but Dane's voice echoed in her head. "Don't try to be a hero." She stepped aside. The steer thundered past, close enough that she felt the heat of its body. It hit the fence at full speed, bounced off, and wheeled back toward the herd. Curtis appeared from nowhere, positioned himself perfectly, and guided the steer back into line with a few sharp whistles. "You okay?" Tommy called. "Yeah." Her heart was hammering, but she was intact. "Good instincts," Curtis said, riding past. "Lots of new people try to stop them. That's how you get trampled." By the time they finished moving the herd, the sun was setting and Eliza felt like she'd lived a week in a single day. They headed back to the ranch in twilight, the truck bed full of tired men who smelled like dust and cattle. "You coming to the mess tonight?" Ray asked. "The mess?" "Friday tradition. Everyone hangs out after dinner, plays cards, drinks beer. You should come." Eliza hesitated. She wasn't sure she had the energy for socializing, but Ray's invitation seemed genuine, and she didn't want to seem standoffish. "Maybe for a bit." The mess turned out to be an old barn that had been converted into a makeshift common room. Mismatched chairs clustered around tables made from shipping pallets. A radio in the corner played country music at low volume. 20 or so ranch hands filled the space, talking, laughing, unwinding after the week. Eliza grabbed a beer from the cooler and found a seat near the back. She didn't know most of these people, and they didn't know her. A few curious glances came her way, but nobody approached. Until the door opened and Vic walked in. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Conversations quieted. Vic grabbed a beer and surveyed the room like a king inspecting his subjects. His gaze landed on Eliza, and his smile sharpened. Well, Crow's still here. How about that?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. 3 whole days, Vic continued, walking closer. "That's got to be some kind of record for women on this ranch. What do you think, Curtis? Didn't the last one quit after 2? Curtis didn't answer. "I had a bet going," Vic said, stopping directly in front of Eliza. 10 guys said you wouldn't last the week. But here you are, proving me wrong." I'm impressed. Thanks. Eliza kept her voice neutral. Of course, the week's not over yet. Still got tomorrow, and next week, and the week after that. His smile never wavered. Lots of time for things to go wrong. I'll manage. Sure you will. Vic took a long drink, then leaned in slightly. You know what I think? I think you're running from something. People don't end up in a place like this unless they got nowhere else to go. So what is it? Bad divorce? Debt? Maybe something worse? The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on them. Eliza met Vic's gaze without flinching. I think that's my business. Maybe, but when you're living on my ranch, working with my men, it becomes my business too. He straightened. Just want to make sure you're not bringing trouble with you. The only trouble here is you running your mouth. The words came from the doorway. Dane stood there, still in his work clothes, holding a beer. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. Vic's expression darkened. Excuse me, you heard me. Dana walked in, his movements unhurried. She's doing the work. She's not causing problems, so maybe you should back off and let her drink her beer in peace. Since when do you care? Since you won't shut up about it. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Vic's jaw worked, his hands clenching and unclenching. For a moment, Eliza thought he might actually take a swing at Dane, but Vic wasn't stupid. Whatever else he was, he knew better than to start a fight he might lose. Fine, he said tightly. Have it your way. But when she washes out, I'm going to enjoy saying I told you so. He stalked out, slamming the door behind him. The room exhaled collectively. Conversations resumed, carefully avoiding the subject of what had just happened. Dane sat down across from Eliza. Don't let him get to you. I won't. He's trying to make you quit. That's his game. He gets off on watching people break. Why? Dane shrugged. Some people are just built that way. He took a drink. But you're not going to break. Are you? It wasn't really a question. No, Eliza said. I'm not. Good. They sat in silence for a while. Around them, the mess slowly returned to normal. Someone started a card game. The radio got turned up. Laughter filled the space again. Can I ask you something? Eliza said. You can ask. Why do you work for someone like Vic? Dane considered the question. I don't work for Vic. I work for the ranch. There's a difference. But you have to deal with him. Yeah, but I've dealt with worse. He finished his beer and stood. Get some rest. We're clearing brush tomorrow. It's going to be brutal. He was right. Brush clearing meant hacking through dense thickets of mesquite and scrub oak that had overgrown a section of grazing land. The branches were thick as a man's wrist, studded with thorns that punched through gloves like they were tissue paper. They worked in pairs. Eliza was partnered with Manuel, who showed her the proper technique. Cut low, pull hard, pile everything for burning later. Don't rush, he said. Thorns will get you every time if you rush. She tried to follow his advice, but the work demanded speed. They had 10 acres to clear, and Dane expected it done by the end of the week. Every minute counted. By noon, Eliza's arms were covered in scratches. One particularly nasty thorn had gouged a line down her forearm that bled freely. She wrapped it with tape and kept working. Manuel watched her with something that might have been respect. You're tougher than you look, he said. I get that a lot. I mean it. Most people don't last a week with Dane. You're coming up on a week, and you're still here, still working. He cut through a thick branch with his machete. Why? Why what? Why do you keep going? You could ask for an easier job. Vic would probably give it to you just to prove a point. But you stay with us. Why? Eliza thought about it while she hauled an armful of brush to the pile. Because if I take the easy job, I'm admitting he was right, that I can't cut it, that I'm weak. She wiped sweat from her face. And I'm tired of being weak. Manuel nodded slowly. Fair answer. They worked in comfortable silence after that. The week ended with a storm rolling in from the west. Black clouds piled up on the horizon, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in an hour. By the time they knocked off for the day, lightning was flickering in the distance. We get much rain out here? Eliza asked Tommy as they secured the equipment. Not often, but when we do, it's usually bad. Flash floods, washed out roads, the whole deal. He glanced at the sky. This one looks nasty. The storm hit just after dinner. Rain came down in sheets, turning the ranch into a sea of mud. Wind howled around the bunkhouse, rattling the windows. Eliza lay in bed listening to the thunder, grateful to be inside. She'd made it a week. 7 days of backbreaking work, of pain and exhaustion and doubt. But she'd made it. And tomorrow, she'd do it again. The rain continued into the next day. Dane's crew spent the morning in the shop, working on equipment that couldn't be used in the downpour. It was almost peaceful, the steady drum of rain on the metal roof, the smell of oil and metal, the quiet satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. Eliza worked on cleaning and oiling harnesses, while Curtis and Ray rebuilt a fence tensioner. Across the shop, Dane was bent over an engine, his hands black with grease. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked Curtis. He didn't look up from his work. "The ranch?" "Yeah, sometimes. Usually when Vic's being particularly terrible." He threaded a new buckle onto the harness. "But then I think about where I'd go, what I'd do. This is what I know. This is what I'm good at. Doesn't seem like much of a choice. What if you had other options? Then maybe I'd take them, but I don't, so here I am." He met her eyes. "Why? You thinking about leaving?" "No, just curious." "Uh-huh." Curtis smiled slightly. "You're a bad liar, Crow." Maybe she was. But the truth was complicated. She wasn't thinking about leaving, but she also couldn't stop wondering what came next. This couldn't be the rest of her life. Endless days of brutal work, scraping by on $40 a week, living in a bunkhouse with no heat and cold showers. Could it? The rain let up by midday, and Dane decided to check the irrigation system. Flooding could damage the pipes they'd just repaired, and he wanted to catch any problems early. "Eliza, you're with me," he said. "Rest of you finish up here." They took the truck out alone, driving slowly through mud that grabbed at the tires. The pasture was underwater in places, small lakes reflecting the gray sky. Dane parked near the valve station, and they got out. Water squelched over Eliza's boots immediately. "Check the main line," Dane said. "I'll take the branches." They split up. Eliza slogged through the mud, checking each joint, each coupling, looking for leaks or damage. The work was tedious but important. Miss one small crack and they'd have another flood on their hands. She was inspecting a T-junction when she heard it, a sharp crack, like a gunshot. "Dane?" No answer. "Dane!" She ran toward where she'd last seen him, her heart pounding. Found him 30 feet away, knee-deep in water, staring at a section of pipe that had separated completely from its coupling. Water was fountaining into the air. "We need to shut it off," he said, already moving. "Valve station. Now." They ran. The mud fought them every step, but they made it to the station and Dane cranked the main valve closed. The fountain died to a trickle, then stopped. "Hell," Dane said, breathing hard. "That's going to take all day to fix." "What do you need me to do?" He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You sure you want to spend your day off standing in freezing water fixing pipes?" "Today's my day off?" "It was supposed to be." Eliza shrugged. "Then I guess I'm spending it standing in freezing water." Dane almost smiled. Almost. "All right, let's get to work." They spent the rest of the day in the mud, working to repair the damage. It was cold, miserable, exhausting work. But Eliza found a strange satisfaction in it. There was a problem. They were fixing it. Simple as that. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and they were both covered head to toe in filth. "Good work," Dane said as they loaded the tools. "Thanks." They drove back in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Comfortable. The silence of two people who'd worked hard together and didn't need to fill the space with words. When they got back, Vic was waiting at the gate. "Where the hell have you two been?" "Irrigation line burst," Dane said. "We fixed it." "On a Sunday? That's overtime I didn't authorize." "Then don't pay us." But the line needed fixing. Vic's face reddened. "You don't make those calls, Rourke. I do. And I'm getting real tired of you going behind my back." "Then do your job better, and I won't have to." For a second, Eliza thought Vic might actually explode, but he just pointed at Dane with a shaking finger. "We're going to have a conversation about this, you and me, soon." "Looking forward to it." Vic stormed off. Dane parked the truck and killed the engine. "That was probably a mistake," Eliza said. "Probably." But Dane didn't sound concerned. Get cleaned up. You've earned a hot shower. The bunkhouse had hot water exactly once a week on Sunday nights. Eliza stood under the spray until the tank ran lukewarm, washing away mud and blood and a week's worth of accumulated grime. When she got out, she found a package on her bed. Inside was a new pair of work gloves, heavy-duty leather with reinforced palms. No note. But she knew who they were from. Eliza sat on her bunk holding the gloves, something tight forming in her chest. They were just gloves. Practical. Nothing sentimental about them, but they meant Dane expected her to stay, and that meant more than she was ready to admit. The gloves fit perfectly, which somehow made them worse. Eliza wore them the next morning, breaking them in on a job hauling posts for a new corral section. The leather was stiff at first, but by midday it had started to mold to her hands, protecting the half-healed blisters underneath. Tommy noticed immediately. Nice gloves. Where'd you get them? Found them. He grinned. Right. Found them. On your bed. After Dane was in the supply shed for 20 minutes yesterday. He was getting supplies. Sure he was. Tommy hefted another post. You know what the guys are saying, right? I try not to pay attention to what the guys are saying. They're saying Dane's gone soft on you. Eliza nearly dropped the post. What? Relax. Nobody actually believes it. Dane doesn't go soft on anybody, but the gloves, the salve, putting you on his crew permanent, it's got people talking. He lowered his voice. Vix noticed too. Just watch yourself. She wanted to argue that there was nothing to watch for, that Dane was just being practical, that the gloves were equipment and nothing more. But the words stuck in her throat because part of her wondered if Tommy was right. The morning stretched into afternoon, hot and cloudless. They were setting posts in concrete, work that required precision and speed before the mix hardened. Eliza held posts straight while Curtis poured and Manuel checked levels. It was teamwork in its purest form, everyone doing their part, trusting the others to do theirs. You're getting better at this, Curtis said, wiping sweat from his forehead. First week I wasn't sure you'd make it. Now you're keeping up. Just barely. That's still more than most. You know how many people we've cycled through this crew in the past year? 11? Some lasted a day, some lasted a week. One guy made it almost a month before he just didn't show up one morning, left all his stuff in the bunkhouse and disappeared. What happened to him? Curtis shrugged. Who knows? Maybe he found something better. Maybe he gave up. Point is, you're still here. That counts. Dane appeared around the side of the truck, carrying another bag of concrete mix. We're 3 bags short. I'm heading back to get more. Eliza, you're with me. She followed him to the truck, confused. Why do you need me? I don't, but Vic's been hanging around all morning, watching you work. Figured you could use a break from that. He was right. She'd felt Vic's eyes on her since breakfast, that predatory attention that made her skin crawl. Every time she looked up, he was there, clipboard in hand, pretending to do inventory or check work schedules. They drove in silence for the first mile. The ranch sprawled around them, endless acres of hard country that seemed designed to break anything soft. Eliza watched the landscape roll past and tried not to think about what Tommy had said. Can I ask you something? She said finally. You've been here 3 weeks. You can probably ask anything by now. Why do people stay? At this ranch, I mean. It's brutal work for terrible pay, and Vic makes everyone miserable. So why do they stay? Dane was quiet for a long moment. You really want to know? I do. Because they don't have anywhere else to go, same as you. He glanced at her. Curtis has a record. Nobody else will hire him. Manuel's got a wife and 3 kids 2 towns over. He sends most of his paycheck home. This job keeps them fed. Ray's been here so long he doesn't know how to do anything else. And Tommy, he paused. Tommy's running from family problems he won't talk about. And you? I'm here because I'm good at this. And because the ranch owner leaves me alone to do my job. His jaw tightened. Most of the time. They pulled up to the supply shed. While Dane loaded concrete bags, Eliza wandered around the building, stretching her legs. Behind the shed, she found a small graveyard of broken equipment, rusted plows, collapsed water tanks, the skeleton of an old tractor. That's Pete's dumping ground, Dane said, appearing beside her. He's the ranch owner, never throws anything away. Figures one day he might need parts. Does he ever need them? Never has yet. Eliza studied a water tank with a hole punched clean through one side. How long have you been here? 4 years, 5 next month. That's a long time. It is. You ever think about leaving? Dane hoisted a bag of concrete onto his shoulder. Every single day. But thinking about it and doing it are different things. He headed back to the truck. Come on, we're burning daylight. On the drive back, Eliza caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not curiosity exactly, something deeper. What? She asked. You remind me of someone. Who? Myself. About 10 years ago. Showed up at a different ranch with nothing but an attitude and a work ethic. Thought if I just pushed hard enough, proved I was worth something, things would get better. Did they? For a while. Then they got worse. Then I ended up here. He turned onto the rough road that led back to the work site. Point is, don't make the mistake I made. What mistake was that? Thinking the work defines you. It doesn't. It's just work. Before she could respond, they crested a hill and saw the work site below. Something was wrong. The crew stood in a cluster, and Vic's truck was parked at an angle that suggested a hurried arrival. Dane swore under his breath and accelerated. They pulled up to find Vic in Curtis's face, jabbing a finger at his chest, while Curtis stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. Don't care what your excuse is. The posts are crooked, all of them. We're going to have to pull them out and start over. They're not crooked, Curtis said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We checked them 3 times. Then you checked them wrong. Vic turned to the rest of the crew. This is what happens when I leave you morons unsupervised for 5 minutes. Everything falls apart. Dane walked over slowly, deliberately. What's the problem? The problem is your crew can't set posts straight. Look at this. Vic gestured at the line of posts they'd set that morning. They're all off by at least 2 inches. They're within tolerance. Your tolerance, maybe, not mine. Then maybe your tolerance is unrealistic. The air went electric. Vic's face reddened. What did you just say to me? You heard me. These posts are fine. You're just looking for something to complain about. I'm the foreman. I decide what's fine. And I'm the crew boss. I say the work's good. They stood facing each other like gunslingers, and Eliza realized with cold certainty that this was about more than posts. This was about power, about Vic reasserting his authority after weeks of Dane quietly undermining it. Pull them out, Vic said. Every single one. Redo the whole section. No. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Vic's eyes went wide. What did you say? I said no. The work is good. We're not redoing it. You don't have a choice. Actually, I do. Because if you want these posts pulled, you're going to have to explain to Pete why we wasted $100 in concrete and 4 hours of labor on work that met spec. Dane crossed his arms. And I'll be standing right there when you do. Vic's mouth worked soundlessly. Around them, the crew watched with barely concealed satisfaction. This was what they'd been waiting for. Someone finally standing up to the tyrant who'd made their lives miserable for years. You're making a mistake, Vic said quietly. Wouldn't be my first. Fine, leave the posts, but this conversation isn't over, not by a long shot. Vic's gaze swept across the crew, landing on Eliza. And you, I've been watching you, cozying up to Dane, getting special treatment. You think I don't see what's happening? Nothing's happening, Eliza said. Sure it's not. That's why he gives you easy assignments, buys you equipment, keeps you on his crew when you can barely keep up. Vic stepped closer. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. Whatever game you think you're playing, it won't work. Dane might have a soft spot, but I don't. One mistake, one screw-up, and you're gone. Understand? Dane moved between them so fast Eliza barely saw it. Back off. Or what? Or I go to Pete and tell him you've been harassing workers. Sexual harassment. Creating a hostile work environment. All things Pete takes very seriously since that lawsuit 5 years ago. Vic went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Vic stepped back, his hands shaking with barely suppressed rage. This isn't over, he repeated. Then he turned and walked to his truck, gravel crunching under his boots. The engine roared to life and he drove away too fast, leaving a dust cloud in his wake. The crew released a collective breath. Holy hell, Tommy said. I thought he was going to swing at you. He's smarter than that. But Dane's jaw was tight, his hands flexing at his sides. Everyone take lunch. We'll finish the post this afternoon. The crew scattered, but Eliza stayed where she was. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Now he's going to come after both of us. He was already coming after you. At least this way you're not facing it alone. Dane met her eyes. You're part of this crew now. That means something. What does it mean? It means we look out for each other. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Eliza standing in the dust with a feeling in her chest she couldn't name. That night, the bunkhouse felt smaller than usual. Eliza lay in bed listening to the wind and thinking about Dane's words. Part of this crew. She'd never been part of anything before. Not really. She'd been a burden, a problem, someone to be tolerated or dismissed. But here, doing work that left her exhausted and bleeding, she was part of something. It didn't make sense, but it felt true. The next morning brought new assignments. Dane's crew was being sent to repair a stock tank 20 miles from the main ranch. It would be an all-day job, possibly overnight if the damage was worse than expected. Pack for 2 days, Dane told them. Bedrolls, food, water. We leave in 30 minutes. The drive out took them through country even more desolate than the ranch itself. Scrubland stretched to the horizon, broken only by occasional mesas and dry creek beds. The stock tank sat in a shallow valley, a concrete basin designed to collect runoff for cattle. Someone had driven into it. The concrete wall was cracked, water slowly leaking into the sand. Teenagers, probably, Ray said, surveying the damage. Happens every few years. They get drunk, go joyriding, end up out here and smash into something. Can we fix it? Eliza asked. We can patch it. Won't be pretty, but it'll hold. Dane started unloading supplies. We'll need to drain it first, then mix concrete and do the repair. If we work fast, we can finish by tomorrow afternoon. They spent the rest of the day draining the tank and cleaning out the crack. The water was brackish and foul-smelling, home to algae and dead insects. Eliza worked knee-deep in the muck, scooping out debris while Curtis and Manuel chipped away loose concrete. By evening, they were filthy and exhausted. They made camp on a flat stretch of ground nearby, building a fire as the sun set. Ray produced cans of beans and a pot of coffee that tasted like motor oil in heaven. You know what I miss most? Tommy said, staring into the fire. Hot showers. I mean, I know we get them once a week at the ranch, but man, I dream about hot showers. I miss good food, Curtis said. My mama used to make this chicken thing, all crispy on the outside and tender inside. Haven't had anything like it in years. I miss my kids, Manuel said quietly. Get to see them maybe once a month if I'm lucky. They're growing up without me. The mood shifted, everyone lost in their own thoughts. What about you? Ray asked Dane. What do you miss? Dane was quiet for so long Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I miss not being tired all the time, not bone-tired from work, just tired of fighting, tired of proving myself, tired of looking over my shoulder. You ever just want to give up? Tommy asked. Every day. But giving up's a luxury I can't afford. Why not? Because people depend on me. The crew, the livestock, the work. Dane poked the fire with a stick. You give up, all of that falls apart. The conversation drifted after that, everyone too tired for deep thoughts. One by one, they rolled out their bedrolls and settled in for the night. Eliza lay on her back, staring at stars so bright and numerous they looked fake. The fire crackled. Someone snored. The night was cold enough that she could see her breath. You still awake? Dane's voice came from nearby. Yeah. Can't sleep? Not yet. Too much going through my head. She heard him shift in his bedroll. Like what? Like how I ended up here. Like what happens next. Like whether I'm crazy for staying in a place that's trying to kill me. You're not crazy. You're just desperate. There's a difference. Is there? Sure, crazy people don't know they're in a bad situation. Desperate people know exactly how bad it is. They just don't have better options. Eliza thought about that. Which one are you? Both, probably. A pause. You ever think about what you'd do if you had money? Real money, I mean. All the time. I'd get a place of my own, nothing fancy, just somewhere with heat and hot water and a lock on the door. She turned her head toward where his voice was coming from. You? I'd buy land. Couple 100 acres. Run it the way I think it should be run. No Vic, no Pete, no answering to anybody. That sounds nice. It does, but it's also impossible. Land costs money I'll never have. So instead, I'm here fixing someone else's stock tank in the middle of nowhere. Could be worse. Could be better. They fell silent. Eliza closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't settle. She kept thinking about Dane's words. Desperate, not crazy. It was a fine distinction, but somehow it mattered. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to someone shaking her shoulder. The sky was still dark, but dawn was coming. She could see the faintest gray line on the eastern horizon. Something's wrong, Dane said quietly. Eliza sat up, instantly alert. What? Listen. She did. At first she heard nothing unusual. Wind, the settling of the fire, Ray's snoring. Then she caught it, a low rhythmic thumping in the distance. Helicopter, she guessed. Out here. Middle of the night? Dane shook his head. Something's off. Wake the others. Quietly. By the time everyone was up, the sound had grown louder. Then lights appeared over a ridge. Not helicopter lights, but headlights. Multiple vehicles coming fast. What the hell, Curtis muttered. The trucks came down the valley road in a convoy. 3 of them, moving with purpose. They pulled up 50 yards from the camp and killed their engines. Doors opened. Men climbed out. 6 of them, all wearing ranch gear, all looking like trouble. Vic was in the lead. Well, well, he said, walking toward the fire. Working late, boys? Dane stood slowly. What do you want, Vic? Just checking on my crew, making sure you're doing the job right. His gaze swept the camp, lingering on Eliza. Heard you were out here overnight. Thought I'd come see for myself. At 4 a.m? Why not? I'm dedicated. Vic's smile was predatory. Besides, I brought some friends. Figured we could all help with the work. Get it done faster. The men with Vic spread out in a loose semicircle. They weren't overtly threatening, but the message was clear. They outnumbered Dane's crew 2-1. We don't need help, Dane said. I think you do. See, I've been going over the books. Notice this job was budgeted for 1 day, not 2. Seems like you're wasting ranch resources. Vic gestured at the damaged tank. So here's what's going to happen. My boys are going to help finish this job, and you're going to accept that help gracefully. And if we don't, then I write you up for insubordination. All of you. 1 more strike, and you're done. Dane's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew when he was beaten. Fine. We'll work together. That's what I thought. Vic's smile widened. Oh, and Crow? You're on my crew today. Want to make sure you're learning the right way to do things. Eliza's stomach dropped. I'm fine where I am. That wasn't a request. She looked at Dane, but he gave the slightest shake of his head. Don't fight this. Not here. Not now. Okay, she said quietly. Vic's crew set to work with aggressive efficiency, taking over the job like they owned it. They pushed Dane's people to the side, made cutting remarks about the quality of their work, generally acted like conquering soldiers. Eliza found herself hauling concrete bags while Vic supervised, his attention never leaving her for long. You're slow, he said after her 3rd trip. I'm doing my best. Your best isn't good enough. See how my guys work? That's what I expect. Fast, efficient, no mistakes. She gritted her teeth and hauled faster. The bags were 60 pounds each, and her arms screamed in protest. But she refused to give Vic the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. Around her, the atmosphere was poisonous. Vic's crew worked hard but mean, making everything a competition. When Tommy tried to help pour concrete, one of Vic's men shouldered him aside. When Curtis questioned a measurement, he was told to shut up and let the professionals work. The hours crawled by. The sun climbed higher, turning the valley into an oven. Eliza's hands blistered through the new gloves. Her back spasmed. But she kept moving, kept working, because stopping meant admitting defeat. By midday, the repair was finished. The concrete was poured, smoothed, and setting in the heat. It was decent work, functional, if not pretty. Vic inspected it with a critical eye. Not bad. Maybe you people can learn after all. He turned to his crew. Pack up. We're heading back. What about us? Dane asked. You're staying. Got to make sure the concrete sets properly. Give it another 6 hours, then you can leave. Vic's smile was cruel. Oh, and Crow's coming with me. Need someone to help unload supplies back at the ranch. She's part of my crew, Dane said, and I'm reassigning her temporarily, unless you want to make an issue of it. The challenge was clear. Push back and face consequences. Eliza could see Dane weighing his options, calculating whether this fight was worth having. How long? He asked finally. Rest of the week, maybe longer if I decide she's more useful elsewhere. That's exactly how it works. I'm the foreman. I decide crew assignments. Vic looked at Eliza. Get your stuff. You're riding with me. Eliza grabbed her bedroll with shaking hands. This was a punishment, pure and simple. Vic was separating her from the only people who'd shown her any kindness, isolating her so he could break her properly. She walked past Dane, who caught her arm briefly. Hang in there, he said quietly. This won't last forever. She wanted to believe him, but looking at Vic's triumphant expression, she wasn't sure. The ride back was torture. Vic drove the lead truck, and Eliza sat in the cab between him and one of his crew, a massive man named Garrett who smelled like chewing tobacco and hostility. Vic talked the entire time, his voice a constant stream of criticism and condescension. You know what your problem is, Crow? You don't know your place. You come in here thinking you're tough, thinking you can hang with the men, but you're just a woman playing at ranch work. And Dane, he shook his head. Dane should know better, but he's got a soft spot for strays, I guess. Eliza stared out the window and said nothing. I'm doing you a favor, really, showing you what real work looks like. Dane goes easy on his crew, lets them slack off. I don't tolerate that. My people work hard, or they leave. He glanced at her. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to spend the rest of this week learning how I run things. And if you can't cut it, which I'm betting you can't, you're gone. No second chances, no begging Dane to save you. I don't beg, Eliza said. Garrett laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. She's got some spine after all. Spine doesn't matter, Vic said. Strength matters. Endurance matters. And she doesn't have enough of either. They arrived back at the ranch just as the afternoon heat peaked. Vic didn't waste time. Garrett, take her to the south barn. We're reorganizing supplies. Everything needs to be moved, cleaned, and restocked. I want it done by tomorrow morning. Garrett grinned. Just the two of us? Just the two of you. Think you can handle it, Crow? The south barn was a disaster. Decades of accumulated junk filled every corner. Broken tools, rotting lumber, ancient feed sacks, rusted equipment. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of decay and animal waste and time. Boss wants this cleared out, Garrett said. We pull everything into the yard, sort it into keeper trash, then organize what's left. Simple. It was anything but simple. The work was backbreaking and endless. Half the items were too heavy for Eliza to move alone, which meant asking Garrett for help, which meant enduring his commentary on how weak she was. You call that lifting? My grandmother could do better, and she's been dead 10 years. Come on, put some muscle into it. Oh wait, you don't have any. This is why women don't belong on ranches. Can't handle the real work. Eliza ignored him and focused on the task. Move the junk, sort the junk, survive the junk. That was all that mattered. By evening, her hands were bleeding again despite the gloves. Her back felt like someone had driven nails into her spine. But the barn was half empty, and she was still standing. Garrett grudgingly admitted she wasn't completely useless. Thought you'd quit by now. Most people do when Vic puts them with me. I'm not most people. Guess not. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Why, you're really here, Crow. What'd you do that was so bad you ended up at Blackwood Ranch? Nothing. I just needed work. Bullshit. Nobody ends up here by choice. This is where you go when you've got nowhere else. So what was it? Bad marriage? Drugs? Gambling? None of your business. Fair enough. He took a long drag. But let me give you some advice. Whatever Dane told you, whatever you think is happening with his crew, forget it. Vic owns this ranch. He owns all of us. And when he decides you're done, you're done. Doesn't matter who's protecting you. Nobody's protecting me, Garrett laughed. Keep telling yourself that. They worked until dark. Then Garrett called it quits. Be back here at 5 tomorrow. We finish this job or Vic's going to make both our lives hell. Eliza stumbled to the dining hall, grabbed food she was too tired to eat, and collapsed on her bunk. Her whole body ached, her mind was fuzzy with exhaustion, but she'd survived day 1 with Vic's crew. Only 4 more to go. The next morning, Garrett was waiting when she arrived at the barn. He'd brought 2 other men, both built like bulls, both looking at her with the same skeptical amusement. This is Doug and Kevin, Garrett said. They're here to help finish up. Vic wants this done today. They worked in brutal silence, moving mountains of junk with mechanical efficiency. Eliza tried to keep up, but these men were on a different level. They hauled things she couldn't budge, worked at speed she couldn't match. By lunch, she was falling behind. "Pick up the pace, Crow," Garrett barked. "We don't have all day." She tried. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she pushed harder, moved faster, refused to be the weak link. It wasn't enough. "Jesus Christ," Doug muttered. "This is taking forever. Vic was right. She's dead weight." "I'm keeping up," Eliza said. "Barely, and barely doesn't cut it." He dropped a crate of tools at her feet. "Sort these. At least that's something you can do without slowing us down." The dismissal stung worse than any of Garrett's insults. She sat in the dust sorting rusted tools while the men did the real work, and felt something inside her crack. This was what Vic wanted, to break her down, make her feel worthless, drive her away. And it was working. That night, she sat in the empty dining hall staring at a plate of cold food and wondering if she should just quit. Take the easy way out. Admit she wasn't strong enough, tough enough, good enough. The door opened. Dane walked in, still covered in dust from the stock tank job. He saw her and stopped. "You okay?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." "Well, I am." He sat down across from her anyway. "Vic working you hard?" "No harder than you do." "That's a lie, and we both know it." He studied her face. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I'm just tired." "Eliza?" "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I don't need you checking on me. I don't need you protecting me. I'm handling it." Dane was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're right. You don't need me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop caring whether you survive this." He stood and walked out, leaving Eliza alone with her cold dinner and the horrible realization that she'd just pushed away the only person who'd shown her any kindness. She put her head in her hands and tried not to cry. Failed. The tears didn't last long. Eliza had learned years ago that crying solved nothing, changed nothing, fixed nothing. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, forced down 3 bites of cold potatoes, and went to bed. Sleep came hard. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dane's face, the disappointment in it, the hurt she'd caused by lashing out. He'd been trying to help, and she'd thrown it back at him like a weapon. But what else could she do? Let him fight her battles? Prove everyone right that she needed special treatment, that she couldn't survive without someone protecting her? No. She had to do this alone, even if it killed her. The alarm went off at 4:30, and Eliza dragged herself upright, feeling like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror was haggard. Dark circles, chapped lips, a bruise on her cheekbone she didn't remember getting. She splashed cold water on her face and got dressed. The barn was waiting. So was Garrett, along with Doug and Kevin. They'd brought a 4th man this time, someone Eliza didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 50, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of outdoor work. "This is Martin," Garrett said. "He's here to make sure we finish today. Vic's orders." Martin looked Eliza up and down with cold assessment. "You the one holding up progress?" "I'm keeping up." "That's not what I heard." He jerked his thumb toward a mountain of sorted supplies. "Everything in that pile needs to be loaded onto pallets and moved to the north storage shed. Think you can handle that?" The pile was enormous. It would take all day just to move it, let alone organize it properly. "I can handle it." "We'll see." They worked in teams, Martin and Garrett on heavy lifting, Doug and Kevin on sorting and cataloging. Eliza was left with the grunt work of hauling boxes and crates from one location to another, loading pallets, securing tarps. It was mindless, repetitive labor that gave her too much time to think. She thought about Dane, about the crew, about whether they were managing without her. She thought about Vic's smug satisfaction when he'd separated her from them. She thought about the week stretching ahead. 3 more days of this torture before she could even hope to rejoin Dane's crew, if Vic let her rejoin at all. Around mid-morning, a truck pulled up outside the barn. Eliza glanced over and felt her stomach drop. Vic climbed out along with 2 men in suits. Ranch owners or buyers, maybe. People with money and authority. "Keep working," Martin said sharply. "Don't stare." Eliza turned back to her pallet, but she could hear Vic's voice carrying across the yard. "Complete renovation of our storage systems. More efficient, better organized. My crew's been working on it for weeks." His crew. Like he'd done any of the work himself. The men toured the barn. Vic pointing out various improvements with the pride of someone taking credit for other people's labor. When they got to where Eliza was working, Vic barely glanced at her. "This is one of our workers," he said dismissively, "part of the general labor pool." One of the suited men looked at her with vague interest. "You hire women often? When they can do the work? Equal opportunity employer and all that?" Vic's smile was plastic, though between you and me, most of them don't last long. Ranch work is tough on everyone, but especially on, well, you know. The implication was clear. Women weren't cut out for this. Eliza's hands tightened on the crate she was holding, but she kept her mouth shut and her head down. Getting into it with Vic in front of potential clients would only make things worse. They moved on, and Eliza released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Smart girl," Martin said quietly. "Vic was hoping you'd say something. Give him an excuse to fire you in front of witnesses." Why would he need witnesses? Because Dane's been making noise about going to Pete over harassment. If Vic fires you for cause, insubordination, poor performance, whatever, then Dane's got no leg to stand on. Martin hefted a crate. "Just keep your head down and do the work. That's the only way you survive around here." The rest of the day was a blur of repetitive motion and building frustration. By the time Vic's tour ended and the suited men drove away, Eliza's arms felt like rubber, and her back was one giant knot of pain. "That's enough for today," Martin said as the sun started to sink. "We're actually ahead of schedule. Vic will be pleased." Garrett looked surprised. "We are?" "Yeah, Crow here moves faster than she looks." Martin nodded at Eliza. "Good work. Be back here tomorrow, same time." It wasn't much of a compliment, but coming from Martin, it felt like high praise. Eliza nodded and headed for the dining hall. Inside, the usual crowd was scattered across tables. She grabbed food and found a corner, trying to be invisible. Tommy spotted her anyway. He came over with his tray, his expression concerned. "Hey, we've been wondering how you're doing." "I'm fine." "Uh-huh. And I'm the King of England." He sat down across from her. "Seriously, how bad is it with Vic's crew?" "It's work, same as anything else." "That's crap and you know it. Vic's punishing you." "Maybe, but I can handle it." Tommy studied her for a moment. "Dane's worried about you." "He shouldn't be." "Well, he is. Won't admit it, of course. But I've worked with him long enough to know when something's bothering him, and you being stuck with Vic's crew is bothering him." "That's not my problem." "Isn't it? You're part of our crew. What happens to you matters to all of us." Eliza pushed food around her plate, not hungry. "I snapped at him last night, said some things I shouldn't have. So apologize." "It's not that simple." "Sure it is. You say, 'I'm sorry.' He says, 'It's fine.' You both move on. People mess up. That's life." "What if he doesn't forgive me?" Tommy laughed. "Have you met Dane? The man's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas and trust issues that could fill a library, but he's not petty. You apologize sincerely, he'll accept it." He paused. "Might take him a minute to show it, but he will." Before Eliza could respond, the dining hall door banged open and Vic walked in with several of his crew. The atmosphere shifted immediately, conversations dying down as people tried not to attract attention. Vic's gaze swept the room and landed on Eliza and Tommy. "Well, look at this. The rejects sticking together." He walked over, his crew flanking him. "How's the barn work going, Crow?" "Fine. Martin says you're keeping up. That's good. Real good. Shows you can work when you're properly supervised." He smiled. "Makes me think maybe you just needed the right kind of management. Dane's too soft. Lets his crew slack off." "That's not true," Tommy said. "No one asked you." Vic's attention stayed on Eliza. "I'm thinking I might keep you on my crew permanent. You're showing potential. Little more discipline, little more structure, and you could actually be useful." The words were meant to sound like a compliment, but they landed like a threat. Permanent assignment to Vic's crew meant no escape, no reprieve, no chance to get back to the people who actually treated her like a human being. "I'd rather stay with Dane's crew," Eliza said carefully. "I'm sure you would, but that's not your decision, is it?" Vic leaned closer. "See, this is my ranch. I make the calls about who works where, and I think you're wasted on fence repair and irrigation. You should be doing real work, important work." "Hauling boxes is important? More important than playing around in the mud with Rourke and his misfits." Vic straightened. "Think about it. You could have a future here. Or you could wash out like everyone else who couldn't cut it. He walked away, leaving Eliza with a sick feeling in her stomach. Don't listen to him, Tommy said. He's messing with your head. I know. Do you? Because you look like you're actually considering it. I'm not. But what choice do I have? If Vic wants to keep me on his crew, there's nothing I can do about it. You could quit. And go where? Do what? Eliza shook her head. This is all I've got. If I leave here, I've got nothing. Tommy's expression softened. Then I guess you better figure out how to survive this, because Vic's not going to make it easy. That night, Eliza lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about choices. She'd spent her whole life making bad ones, trusting the wrong people, taking jobs that went nowhere, believing things would get better if she just worked hard enough. And here she was, trapped in another impossible situation with no good options. She could stay on Vic's crew, endure his abuse, and hope he eventually got bored and reassigned her. She could go to Pete, the ranch owner, and complain. But that would make her a target, and Pete might not even care. She could quit, walk away, start over somewhere else with nothing but the clothes on her back and $40 to her name. Or she could fight back. The thought crystallized slowly, taking shape in the darkness. What if she didn't just endure? What if she proved she was good enough, strong enough, valuable enough that Vic had no choice but to respect her? It was a long shot, maybe impossible, but it was better than giving up. The next morning, Eliza arrived at the barn with a different mindset. She wasn't here to survive, she was here to excel. Garrett noticed immediately. You're early. Wanted to get started. On what? Martin's not even here yet. Doesn't matter, there's work to do. She grabbed a pallet jack and started organizing the remaining supplies, working with focused intensity. When Garrett and the others arrived, she'd already cleared a quarter of what needed moving. Martin raised his eyebrows. Ambitious. Just efficient. They worked through the morning at a blistering pace. Eliza pushed herself harder than ever, ignoring her screaming muscles and bleeding hands. Every box she moved, every pallet she loaded was proof that she could do this. By lunch, they were nearly finished with the entire project. Holy hell, Doug said, wiping sweat from his forehead. At this rate, we'll be done by 3. 2 if we skip lunch, Eliza said. Garrett laughed. You serious? Why not? We're almost there. Might as well finish. Martin looked at her with something approaching respect. You trying to impress someone, Crow? I'm trying to get this done. Fair enough. Let's do it. They worked through lunch, fueled by stubbornness and the finish line in sight. By 2:30, the last box was loaded, the last pallet secured, the barn completely reorganized. Martin surveyed the work with his hands on his hips. Not bad. Not bad at all. He looked at Eliza. You work like this on Dane's crew? Yes. Then I don't know why Vic thinks you need supervision. You're one of the hardest workers I've seen in a while. The words shouldn't have meant as much as they did. But after days of criticism and contempt, hearing genuine praise made something loosen in Eliza's chest. Thanks. Don't thank me. You earned it. Martin pulled out his phone. I'm calling Vic, telling him the job's done early. Maybe he'll cut you loose sooner. But when Vic arrived an hour later, he didn't look pleased. He looked irritated. You finished early? Yes, sir, Martin said. Crew worked hard. Got it done ahead of schedule. Vic walked through the barn, inspecting every corner with a critical eye. He was looking for mistakes, for something to complain about. But there was nothing. The work was flawless. Finally, he turned to Eliza. You think you're clever, don't you? I think I did the job you gave me. You think finishing early impresses me? All you did was prove you were holding back before, not working up to your potential. His jaw tightened. Well, congratulations. Now I know what you're capable of. And I'm going to make sure you work at that level every single day. That's not fair, Garrett said. She did good work. I'll decide what's fair. Vic turned to Martin. I've got another project. North fence line needs complete replacement. 2 miles of posts and wire. I want it done in 3 days. Martin's eyes widened. That's a week's work at least. Then I guess you better work fast. Take your whole crew, including Crow. Vic, that's not realistic. Make it realistic. That's what I pay you for. Vic looked at Eliza. Still think you're clever? He left before she could respond. Garrett swore under his breath. 2 miles in 3 days. He's out of his mind. He's punishing her, Doug said. making her regret working too hard. Martin shook his head. Doesn't matter why. We've got our orders. Everyone be ready at dawn tomorrow. This is going to be hell. He was right. The north fence line stretched across the most brutal terrain on the ranch. Rocky ground studded with cactus and scrub, ravines that required careful navigation, sections where the old fence had been completely destroyed by weather or wildlife. They started at first light and worked until dark without breaks. Post holes had to be blasted out of rock. Wire had to be strung across gaps that seemed impossible to bridge. Every inch was a fight. Eliza worked until her hands bled through the gloves, until her legs shook with exhaustion, until her vision blurred at the edges. The crew pushed just as hard, knowing that failure would bring Vic's wrath down on all of them. By the end of day one, they'd covered maybe a quarter mile. At this rate, 3 days wasn't nearly enough. We're going to have to work nights, Martin said as they packed up. Sleep in shifts. It's the only way. That's insane, Kevin protested. So is this deadline. But it's what we've got. Martin looked around at the exhausted crew. Anyone who wants out, speak now. No judgment. Nobody spoke. All right then, we make camp here. 4-hour shifts, 2 people working, 2 people sleeping. We rotate until it's done. They set up a bare-bones camp, no fire, no comfort, just bedrolls and a determination born of desperation. Eliza took the first shift with Garrett, working by the light of battery-powered lamps. The night was cold and clear. Stars filled the sky like spilled salt. They worked in silence, the only sounds their breathing and the clang of metal on rock. Why are you doing this? Garrett asked after an hour. Same reason you are. Don't have a choice. Yeah, you do. You could quit. Find another job. Hell, probably find a better job. Instead, you're out here beating yourself to death for a man who hates you. Vic doesn't hate me. Garrett snorted. Sure he does. Hates that you're tough enough to stick around. Hates that Dane respects you. Hates that you won't break. He drove a post into the ground with vicious force. But mostly he hates that you remind him of his own failures. What failures? All of them. Vic's been foreman here for 15 years and he's got nothing to show for it. No savings, no prospects, no life outside this ranch. He could have done better, should have done better, but he didn't. And now he takes it out on everyone else. Eliza thought about that while they worked. It didn't excuse Vic's behavior, but it explained it. He was a small man, desperately trying to feel big by crushing people smaller than him. Understanding that didn't make her hate him less, but it made her pity him, which was somehow worse. They worked through the night in shifts, each team pushing as hard as they could. By dawn of day 2, they'd covered another quarter mile. Progress, but still not enough. We need to pick up the pace, Martin said. Everyone's working double shifts from now on. 8 hours on, 4 hours off. It was brutal mathematics, not enough sleep, not enough recovery time, pushing human bodies past their limits. But nobody argued. Day 2 blurred into a nightmare of repetitive motion and mounting exhaustion. Eliza's hands were destroyed, the blisters torn open and infected. Her back felt like broken glass. But she kept moving, kept working, because stopping meant failure. Around midday, Doug collapsed. One moment he was driving a post, the next he was on the ground, unconscious. Heat exhaustion or simple fatigue, it was hard to tell. Martin knelt beside him, checking vitals. He's breathing, pulse is strong, just needs rest and water. Should we call for help? Kevin asked. And tell Vic we couldn't handle the job? No way. Martin looked around. Doug sits this one out. Rest of us pick up the slack. They pushed harder, 4 people doing the work of 5, running on fumes and stubbornness. The sun hammered down. The fence line stretched endlessly ahead. Eliza's vision started to narrow, black spots dancing at the edges. She recognized the signs of her body shutting down, but pushed through anyway. Just a little more. Just a little further. She was driving a post when her legs gave out. She hit the ground hard, the sledgehammer falling from nerveless fingers. Somewhere far away someone was shouting her name, but the darkness was pulling her down, offering escape from the pain. She let it take her. When Eliza woke, she was lying in the shade of the truck with a wet cloth on her forehead. Garrett knelt beside her, looking worried. There she is. Thought we lost you for a minute. What happened? You passed out. Been out for about 10 minutes. He helped her sit up slowly. You need to rest. We don't have time for rest. Martin's orders. You're done for the day. No, I can keep working. Crow, you can barely sit up. You're not working anymore today. Eliza tried to stand and immediately regretted it. The world spun violently, and she would have fallen if Garrett hadn't caught her. Easy. Just sit here and drink this. He handed her a canteen of water. We'll manage without you for a few hours. She wanted to argue, but her body had given everything it had, and there was nothing left. She sat in the shade drinking water and watching the crew work, hating her weakness. Around sunset, Martin called it for the day. They'd covered 3/4 of a mile total. Good progress, but still short of what they needed. One more day, he said. We can do this. But everyone needs real sleep tonight, no more shifts. We sleep 6 hours, then we finish this thing. They made camp properly this time, building a fire and heating cans of food that tasted like heaven. Doug had recovered enough to sit up and complain about missing the work. Eliza's hands had swollen to the point where she couldn't make a fist. You should see a doctor, Kevin said. I'll see a doctor when we're done. They might be infected. They definitely are, but there's nothing to do about it now except keep them clean and keep working. Garrett shook his head. You're as stubborn as Dane. Maybe worse. Is that a compliment? With you? Probably. They slept under the stars, 6 people too exhausted for conversation. Eliza lay on her bedroll and looked up at the sky, thinking about Dane and wondering if he knew what Vic was putting them through. Probably. And knowing him, he was furious about it. The thought was oddly comforting. Day 3 started before dawn. They worked like machines, each person focused entirely on their task. No talking, no breaks, just relentless forward motion. Eliza's hands were agony, but she wrapped them tighter and kept going. Every post driven was one step closer to being done, one step closer to getting away from Vic's crew and back to where she belonged. The sun climbed, the temperature soared, they worked through it all. By noon, they'd covered another half-mile. By mid-afternoon, they could see the end of the fence line in the distance. We're gonna make it, Doug said, disbelief in his voice. Don't jinx it, Martin warned. We're not done until the last post is in the ground. They pushed through the final section with desperate energy. The sun was touching the horizon when Eliza drove the last post into place. Garrett strung the final section of wire. Martin inspected the connection and nodded. That's it. We're done. The crew stood in silence for a moment, too exhausted to celebrate. Then Kevin let out a whoop, and suddenly they were all laughing, the sound slightly hysterical but genuine. 2 miles in 3 days, Doug said. I can't believe we actually did it. Neither can I, Martin admitted. He looked at Eliza. You're something else, Crow. Most people would have quit after day 1. I don't quit. Yeah, I noticed. He clapped her on the shoulder. Let's get back and tell Vic he can shove his impossible deadlines. The ride back to the ranch felt like a victory lap. They were filthy, exhausted, barely functional, but they'd done the impossible, proven that Vic's punishment could be survived. When they pulled up to the main yard, Dane was waiting. He looked tired, covered in dust from whatever job his crew had been doing. But when he saw Eliza climb out of the truck, something in his expression shifted. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look half dead. Then I'm better than I was yesterday. She tried to smile, but her face felt too stiff. We finished the fence line. 2 miles in 3 days. That's impossible. Yeah, we did it anyway. Dane looked past her at Martin and the others. Vic tell you to do that? He did, Martin confirmed. Gave us 3 days for a week's work. Thought it would break us. Did it? Almost, but Crow here wouldn't let it. Martin shook his head. Never seen anything like it. She worked harder than anyone, even after she collapsed. You collapsed? Eliza waved a hand dismissively. Just for a minute. I'm fine now. You're not fine. Your hands are infected and you can barely stand. Dane's voice was tight with controlled anger. Where's Vic? Dane, don't... But he was already walking toward the main office, his strides long and purposeful. Eliza tried to follow, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She watched helplessly as Dane disappeared into the building. This should be good, Garrett muttered. Through the office windows, they could see Dane and Vic facing off. Couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Dane was furious. Vic was defensive. Then Vic said something that made Dane's whole posture change. He stepped closer, said something low and sharp. Vic's face went red. The door burst open and Vic stormed out, pointing at Eliza. You're the cause of this. Everything was fine until you showed up and Rourke lost his mind. Leave her alone, Dane said, following him out. Why? So you can keep protecting her? Everyone sees it, Dane. You've gone soft. Letting women on your crew, giving them special treatment, undermining my authority. Your authority? Dane laughed harshly. You don't have authority. You have a title and a power trip. There's a difference. I'm the foreman of this ranch, and you're a terrible one. You waste resources, abuse workers, and make decisions based on ego instead of efficiency. I've been covering for you for years, fixing your mistakes, making sure the work gets done despite you. But I'm done. You want to keep punishing Eliza? Fine. But she comes back to my crew, tonight. That's not your call. Then let's ask Pete. Right now. We'll both explain our sides and see who he believes. Vic's face went pale. For a moment, Eliza thought he might actually back down. Then his expression hardened. Fine. She goes back to your crew. But this isn't over, Dane, not by a long shot. You've made an enemy today. Pretty sure I made an enemy the day I refused to kiss your boots. This is just making it official. Vic stalked away, and Dane turned to Eliza. Can you walk? Yes. Then come on, we're getting you to the clinic. I don't need... That wasn't a request. He guided her to his truck, his hand gentle on her elbow despite the anger radiating from him. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Eliza finally spoke. I'm sorry. For what? For what I said the other night. For snapping at you. You were trying to help, and I threw it back in your face. Dane was quiet for a long moment. I get it. You wanted to prove you could handle things alone, that you didn't need saving. Yeah. And you did prove it. You survived 3 days of Vic's worst and came out the other side. He glanced at her. But that doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. Being part of a crew means letting people have your back sometimes. I'm not used to that. I know, but you're going to have to get used to it, because you're stuck with us now. The clinic was a small building on the edge of the ranch property, staffed by a tough older woman named Sarah, who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. She took one look at Eliza's hands and sighed. What did you do? Worked? Worked yourself into an infection, looks like. Sit down. She cleaned and bandaged the wounds with efficient brutality, lecturing the whole time about proper hand care and knowing when to stop. Eliza endured it silently, too tired to argue. You're lucky, Sarah said finally. Another day or two and this could have been serious. As it is, you're on light duty for at least a week. No heavy lifting, no prolonged grip work. I can't take a week off. I didn't say take time off. I said light duty. There's plenty of work on a ranch that doesn't require ruining your hands. She looked at Dane. You make sure she follows orders. I don't want to see her back here with something worse. Yes, ma'am. They drove back to the main ranch as the last light faded from the sky. Eliza stared out the window, processing everything that had happened. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For standing up to Vic, for getting me out of there. For... She gestured vaguely. Everything. You don't have to thank me. I do. You didn't have to do any of that. You could have let Vic keep me on his crew, avoided the conflict, but you didn't. Dane pulled up to the bunkhouse and killed the engine. You're part of my crew, Eliza. That means I look out for you. Same as I look out for Tommy, Curtis, Ray, and Manuel. It's not special treatment, it's just how it works. But the way he said it, the way he looked at her, it felt like more than that. Eliza climbed out of the truck, her bandaged hands clumsy on the door handle. Get some rest, Dane said. Tomorrow we're back to normal work. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic, just fence repair and irrigation checks. Sounds perfect. She headed into the bunkhouse, exhaustion pulling at every step, but for the first time in days she felt something like hope. She'd survived Vic's worst, proven she could endure anything he threw at her, and tomorrow she'd be back with her crew, where she belonged. The next morning felt different. Eliza woke to sunlight streaming through the bunkhouse window and realized she'd slept past the alarm for the first time in weeks. Her hands throbbed under the bandages, but it was a manageable pain, the kind that reminded her she was alive and healing. She dressed carefully, protecting her wrapped hands, and headed to the dining hall. The crew was already there, Tommy waving her over with a grin that split his sunburned face. Look who's back from the dead, he said as she sat down. How are the hands? Sore, but Sarah says I'll live. Curtis slid a plate across to her. Grabbed you extra bacon. Figure you earned it after that fence line job. Martin told us what happened. Word travels fast. Always does on a ranch. Ray leaned back in his chair. Whole place is talking about how you and Vic's crew did 2 miles in 3 days. Half the people think you're crazy. Other half think you're tougher than steel. I'm neither. Just desperate enough to keep going. Manuel shook his head. That's the same thing as tough, Crow. You just don't see it yet. Dane arrived as she was finishing breakfast. You ready to work? Light duty only, she said, holding up her bandaged hands. Sarah's orders. Good. You're on equipment maintenance with Curtis. Nothing that requires grip strength. He paused. And before you argue, light duty doesn't mean useless. We need someone with attention to detail, and that's you. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd gotten from him, and it landed with unexpected weight. They spent the morning in the equipment shed, Curtis teaching her the finer points of engine maintenance while she cleaned parts and organized tools. It was quiet work, methodical, and after the brutal pace of the fence line, it felt like a vacation. You ever think about what comes next? Curtis asked around noon, his hands black with grease as he reassembled a carburetor. Next as in tomorrow, or next as in the rest of my life? Either, both. Eliza wiped down a wrench, considering, I try not to think past next week. Feels like tempting fate. Yeah, I get that. But you can't live your whole life 1 week at a time. Eventually, you've got to have a plan. Says the man who's been here 10 years. Curtis laughed. Fair point, but I've got a plan. Just taking me a while to execute it. What's the plan? Save enough to buy a little place somewhere. Nothing fancy. Just a few acres where I can work for myself instead of someone else. He tightened a bolt with practiced precision. Figure another 5 years, maybe 10, and I'll have enough. That's a long time. It is, but it's better than no plan at all. He glanced at her. You should think about what you want, Eliza. Not just surviving, but actually living. There's a difference. She thought about that while they worked. Surviving was all she'd known for years, finding the next job, scraping together rent, making it through another month. The idea of actually planning for something more felt foreign, almost dangerous. But maybe Curtis was right. Maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. The afternoon brought visitors. A sleek black car pulled up to the main office, and 2 well-dressed people climbed out. A man and a woman who looked like they'd wandered in from a different world. Clean clothes, expensive watches, the kind of confidence that came from never missing a meal. Who are they? Eliza asked. No idea. But they're heading for Pete's office, so it's probably business. An hour later, Vic appeared at the equipment shed door, his expression dark. Rourke, Pete wants to see you, and bring Crow. Dane straightened slowly. What's this about? How should I know? Just get up there. Now. They walked to the main office in silence, Eliza's stomach knotting with apprehension. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. Pete's office was surprisingly modest for a ranch owner. Worn furniture, faded photos on the walls, a desk buried under paperwork. Pete himself was in his 60s, weathered and serious, with eyes that missed nothing. The 2 visitors sat across from him, watching as Dane and Eliza entered. Dane, Eliza, this is Richard and Catherine Montgomery. They're looking to buy a ranch, and they've been touring properties in the area. Pete gestured to chairs. Sit down. Richard Montgomery spoke first, his voice smooth and corporate. We've heard interesting things about your operation here, Mr. Blackwood, particularly about your crew management and efficiency. We do good work, Pete said carefully. So we've heard. In fact, we witnessed some of it yesterday. My wife and I were touring your storage facilities when we happened to observe your workers. Richard's gaze settled on Eliza, including this young woman who seemed to be working under considerable pressure. Eliza's blood went cold. They'd been there during Vic's show when he'd paraded them in front of potential clients, like performing animals. I'm not sure what you're implying, Pete said. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Your foreman, Mr. Drummond, made several disparaging comments about female workers while we were there. He then proceeded to work this woman, Richard nodded at Eliza, in what appeared to be punishment detail. Am I wrong? The room went silent. Vic, standing by the door, had gone pale. That's not, he started, but Pete held up a hand. Let them finish. Catherine Montgomery leaned forward. We did some research after our visit, called around to other ranches, talked to former workers. The pattern is concerning, Mr. Blackwood. High turnover, multiple complaints about hostile work environment, and a foreman who seems to rule through intimidation rather than leadership. These are serious allegations, Pete said quietly. They are. And normally we'd simply take our business elsewhere. But my wife and I believe in second chances. We believe good people can work in bad systems without realizing how bad those systems are. Catherine looked at Dane. We'd like to offer you a position, Mr. Rourke, head foreman at our new ranch. Better pay, better conditions, and the authority to build a crew the right way. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Dane's expression was unreadable. That's a generous offer. It's a deserved offer. From what we've seen and heard, you're exactly the kind of person we want running our operation. Richard pulled out a card. Think about it. The offer stands for 1 week. They stood, shook hands with Pete, and left. The office felt smaller in their absence. Pete looked at Vic. Get out. We'll talk later. Vic fled like a rat abandoning ship. When the door closed, Pete turned to Dane. You planning to take that offer? I don't know yet. Honest answer. Pete shifted his attention to Eliza. How are your hands? Healing, sir. Sarah says Vic worked you near to death on that fence line. 3 days for a week's work. That true? We got it done. That's not what I asked. Eliza met his eyes. Yes, sir. It's true. Pete nodded slowly. I built this ranch from nothing 40 years ago. Worked every job there is, fence repair, cattle drives, equipment maintenance. I know what's reasonable and what's punishment. What Vic did to you and that crew wasn't reasonable. He paused. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You can't see everything, Dane said. No, but I should have paid better attention. Vic's been getting worse for years and I ignored it because the work got done. That was my mistake. Pete stood. I'm making changes. Starting today. Vic's being moved to a different position, inventory management, no crew supervision, and I'm promoting you, Dane. You're foreman now, full authority, better pay, and the crew assignments you think make sense. What about the Montgomery offer? That's up to you, but I'm asking you to stay. Help me fix this place, make it what it should be. Pete extended his hand. What do you say? Dane looked at the offered hand for a long moment, then shook it. I say you've got yourself a foreman. Relief crossed Pete's face. Good. Good. Now get out of here. You've got work to do. Outside, Dane stood in the afternoon sun looking like someone who'd been hit with a 2x4. You okay? Eliza asked. I just became foreman of a ranch I was planning to leave eventually. So no, I'm not sure I'm okay. He ran a hand through his hair. But it's the right call. This place can be better. I can make it better. You will. How are you so sure? Because I've watched you work for 6 weeks. You don't do anything halfway. If you're staying to fix this place, you'll fix it. Dane looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd been beaten down by life and refused to stay down. Come on, he said. Let's tell the crew. The announcement was met with varying degrees of shock and celebration. Tommy whooped. Curtis grinned. Ray and Manuel exchanged satisfied nods. About damn time, Curtis said. Pete should have done this years ago. What happens to Vic? Tommy asked. He's off crew supervision. Pete's moving him to inventory. So he's basically been demoted to counting supplies in a warehouse. That's beautiful. Tommy raised his water bottle. To Dane, the only foreman worth working for. They toasted with whatever they had handy. Water, coffee, in Ray's case a can of soda he'd been saving. It was a small moment, silly even, but it mattered. That night, the mess was packed. Word had spread about the changes, and everyone wanted to celebrate the end of Vic's reign of terror. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else produced a bottle of whiskey that got passed around until it was empty. Eliza sat with the crew, listening to Tommy tell exaggerated stories about their various misadventures. She felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't know was there, and someone had finally lifted it. You're smiling, Dane said, appearing beside her with 2 beers. That's new. I smile. Not like that, you don't. He handed her one of the bottles. You happy? I think I might be. It's weird. Get used to it. Things are going to be different around here. Different how? Better schedules, Fair assignments, no more punishment details or impossible deadlines. He took a drink. And I'm bringing in new people, building a crew that actually works together instead of just surviving each other. You're going to be good at this. Maybe. Or maybe I'll crash and burn spectacularly. But he was smiling when he said it, the rare expression transforming his usually serious face. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the party unfold around them. The guitar player started a song everyone knew, and soon half the room was singing along, off-key and enthusiastic. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said. "Sure." "Why did you really turn down the Montgomery offer? You could have left all this behind, started fresh somewhere else." Dane considered his beer, because running away doesn't fix anything. "I've spent my whole life moving from place to place, thinking the next ranch would be different, the next job would be better. But the problems followed me because I was the problem, or part of it, anyway. I let bad bosses get away with bad behavior. I didn't speak up. I just kept my head down and did the work. That's survival. It's cowardice, and I'm tired of it." He met her eyes. "You taught me that, actually." "Me? You showed up here with nothing. No experience, no connections, no reason anyone should have given you a chance. And you could have quit a dozen times. Should have quit, honestly. But you didn't. You kept showing up, kept working, kept proving you belonged. That takes guts I didn't know I had." Eliza felt heat in her face that had nothing to do with the beer. "I just did what I had to do. That's what makes it brave. You didn't have a choice, but you chose anyway." Dane stood. "I'm going to try to be more like that. Make choices instead of just reacting. Start building something instead of just surviving." He walked away to check on something, leaving Eliza with her thoughts and a warmth in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. The weeks that followed were different in ways both obvious and subtle. Dane restructured the crews, breaking up the old cliques and mixing people based on skills rather than seniority. He instituted regular breaks and enforced safety protocols that Vic had ignored. Slowly, cautiously, the ranch started to feel less like a prison and more like a workplace. Eliza's hands healed. She returned to full duty, working with the crew on projects that challenged her in good ways. Dane taught her equipment operation, letting her practice on tractors and trucks until she felt confident. Curtis showed her welding. Manuel walked her through livestock management. She was learning, growing, becoming something more than just someone who could survive. 2 months after Dane's promotion, Pete called another meeting. This time it was just the core crew, Dane's people, the ones who'd stuck it out through everything. "I've been thinking about the future," Pete said. "I'm getting old. Don't have kids to pass this place to. Eventually I'm going to sell, and when that happens, I want to make sure it goes to someone who will take care of it right." He looked around the room. "You people are the heart of this ranch. The work you do, the way you do it, that's what makes Blackwood worth something. So I'm offering you a deal. Work with me for the next 5 years, help build this place into something really special, and when I sell, you'll all get a percentage of the profits. Could be enough to buy your own land, start your own operation, whatever you want." Curtis leaned forward. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I should have taken care of my people better years ago. This is me trying to make it right." The room erupted in questions and exclamations. Eliza sat quietly, processing what this meant. 5 years of steady work. A future beyond next week or next month. The possibility of actually owning something instead of just surviving. After the meeting, Dane found her outside the main office. "You're being quiet," he said. "Just thinking." "About?" "About how 6 months ago I had $3 in my pocket and nowhere to go, and now I've got a job, a crew, and a shot at something better." She shook her head. "Doesn't feel real." "It's real. You earned it." "Did I? Or did I just get lucky?" "Both, but mostly earned." Dane leaned against the wall beside her. "You know what the difference is between you and most people who come through here?" "What?" "You didn't just survive, you adapted. You learned. You became part of something bigger than yourself." He paused. "That's rare. Most people are so busy protecting themselves they never let anyone in. But you let the crew matter to you, and that changed everything." Eliza thought about that. He was right. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped thinking of this as just a job and started thinking of it as home. The crew weren't just co-workers, they were family. The kind you chose instead of the kind you were born into. "What are you going to do with your share?" she asked. "When Pete sells?" "Build that ranch I told you about. Small operation, sustainable, run the right way. He glanced at her. I'll need a good crew, people I can trust. You interested? Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, if you want it. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. I want it, Eliza said. But ask me again in 5 years, a lot can change. Fair enough. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The land stretched around them, harsh and beautiful, the kind of place that broke weak things and forged strong ones. Eliza had arrived here broken, desperate, with nothing to lose. She was leaving, well, not leaving exactly, but transforming into someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who belonged. The next 5 years wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. There would be hard days and setbacks and moments when quitting seemed like the smart choice. But Eliza had learned something important in her time at Blackwood Ranch. The smart choice wasn't always the right choice. Sometimes the right choice was the hard one, the one that required everything you had and then a little bit more. Sometimes the right choice was to keep showing up, keep working, keep proving that you were more than what anyone expected. She'd come to this place as a joke, the woman nobody thought would last a week. But she'd become something else entirely. Not because the work changed her, but because she'd let herself change through the work. That night, as the crew gathered for dinner, Tommy raised his glass. To Eliza, he said, who proved that being tough isn't about size or strength, it's about heart. To Eliza, the crew echoed. She ducked her head, embarrassed but pleased. Across the table, Dane caught her eye and nodded once. Approval, respect, recognition. They were building something here, not just fences or irrigation systems, but something that mattered, a place where people could be broken and still find their way to becoming whole again. Eliza lifted her glass and drank, surrounded by people who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to keep her anyway. People who'd become more than coworkers or friends. They'd become the family she'd never had. And somewhere in the hard ground of the Blackwood Ranch, she'd planted roots deep enough to weather any storm. The future was uncertain. The work would always be brutal. The land would never be gentle. But Eliza Crow had learned how to be unbreakable, and that made all the difference. She'd come here with nothing, seeking only survival. What she found instead was something infinitely more valuable, a place where her strength mattered, where her determination counted, where showing up every day and refusing to quit transformed her from someone the world had overlooked into someone who could stand equal with the best. The ranch hadn't broken her. It had built her into exactly who she was meant to be. And that, Eliza realized as she sat among her crew under the vast frontier sky, was worth more than all the comfort and safety she'd once dreamed of. Because comfort was something the world gave you, but strength, real strength, was something you forged yourself, one brutal day at a time, until you became undeniable. She'd become undeniable, and nothing would ever take that away.